So therefore, if anybody has a question to ask Shaykh Arif, they may raise their hand and ask. I think I can see Dr. Kamran raising his hand. Dr. Kamran, please unmute and go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Arif bhai. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes. Absolutely fascinating. Arif bhai, I'm Dr. Kamran Khan from Mumbai. And we are students of the Quran, me and a lot of my colleagues from India. And let me tell you that what I find very fascinating is that the 10 or 15 years which I have been studying the Quran, devoid of translations and going into the real meaning and the root words, reading your book, listening to you, I realize that if I stay on that path, I may reach there, maybe in the next 10 years, perhaps. So what I find fascinating is that meeting you and Aslam Parvez Saab, I met so many diverse people from different corners of the world who gave up everything and dedicated themselves to re-understanding the Quran and did not accept anything said in translation at face value. When I hear you and when I hear him, I find that our thoughts reflect immensely. And one point I'd like to make is that can you still, I find that there is a lot of confusion in the mind of many people. Show us the way forward in a few points. What should we be doing? The average educated Muslim who is torn between the traditional understanding of Islam and his otherwise his modern education, which doesn't match between the two. The thoughts don't match. I accept. I mean, I really appreciate the way you understand that Quran celebrates human plurality rather than the narrow-minded understanding of a ritualistic religion, which we are made to understand. Thank you, Arif bhai.
Kamran bhai, thank you so much for those wonderful words of yours and comments. I'm truly humbled. Um, out of my own experiences, um, it took me 40 years to uncondition or decondition myself from religious conditioning. It's something that is terribly overpowering and embracing because the cradle of culture and religion is the place where we are molded in the firmest way. So this is going to be a bit of a struggle. One thing that I find is that we need to forge this intimate tie with Allah, and we need to. Somebody's sound somewhere. Um,
Yeah, I think there's some.
you can just mute it.
Yeah.
So we need to have that confidence in Allah. We have to say to Allah, first and foremost, you are the friend, you are the creator, you are the nurturer. With my parents, I have the confidence to be myself. With my friends, I have this myself as and how I am. I'm going to take this liberty, O Allah, to be with you as I am with a parental figure and with an intimate companion. And I'm going to be truthful to you that these things do not make sense to me, and I'm going to embark upon a journey of discovery. And I want you to accompany me and to condone this journey. That's the first step. We need to get it right with Allah and to share with Allah so fully and openly. Then I would say, look at the previous scriptures. Look at what they talk about in terms of human genesis. Look at what they talk about human purpose, how God has been depicted. What were their practices? What this will do immediately, it will open our minds to that singularity of human endeavor to find the truth and to go forward as a diverse, pluralistic community within the ambit of God's unity. That's the other thing that I myself have done. The third thing is I've actually forced myself to re-examine Islamic history and to come to this point that majority of it, together with Islamic theology, is unfounded. These are just things that we've concocted as we've gone along. And I've gone to places of different Muslims and worshipped with them. I've gone to churches, temples, mandirs, gurudwaras, and worship one God through them. I've done all of these things only to relieve this heart of its biases and in order to embrace the truth beyond the truth. But these are my personal steps that I myself have taken. I don't know if that will help.
Okay. Anyone else? They can ask. I don't see any raised hands. Sometimes due to a technical issue, if the hands are raised, I don't see them. So people who want to ask, they might as well unmute. And I can see one Mr. Shakil's hand going up. Mr. Shakil, go ahead. Unmute yourself and ask.
Am I audible now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thanks for your fascinating lecture. I just want to check with you that the verse which you quoted from Surah Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 62, I often find people quote this verse, but I often seek some clarity also whenever this verse is quoted and explained in that manner. From chapter Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 62, where you say is that where the verse says that surely those who believe in Allah, Jews, Christians, Sabian, whoever believes in Allah and in the last day and do good deeds, they don't have to fear. Okay. Now that good deed, the righteous, the word, the righteous deed, we know that Christians, Jews, they say that Prophet Muhammad, peace be unto him, is a false prophet. So how that righteous, when it says righteous, those who say that the Jews and Christians who says that Prophet is a false prophet, Prophet Muhammad is a false prophet, will they come in this category?
Yes,
That's
sure.
my question.
Sure, of course. Now, in Afghanistan, during the time of the Taliban, an Afghani chose to become a Christian. Obviously, the Muslims said he's an apostate, so we should put him to that. The Muslims never unite in anything, but they unite in killing an apostate, by the way. So 1.5 billion Muslims are united who can never do one Eid together, can't pray together, but they're united in killing that one man. Amazing. Now, the Prophet Muhammad was represented to that man through the Taliban version of interpretation of Islam and the character of the Prophet Muhammad. That man was appalled by the Prophet Muhammad and he said, no, Jesus is all about love and peace and God. Now, that man, in my view, has gone from a false Islam to true Islam. Why? Because he is searching and yearning for God. And what was not accurate, even if it is depicted in the name of the Prophet Muhammad, he left. And in fact, going to Jesus, he found the true teaching of Prophet Muhammad reflected through Jesus. Now, righteous deed is not the prayer in terms of its form or fast. Righteous deed is that beautiful interaction with the prayer. The Prophet said, if your prayer does not make you better, then that prayer has gone to waste. Because God says, "Inna salat al-fahsha'i wal-munkar." Salah moves you away from indecency and things that are reprehensible and wrong. And therefore, if your prayer does not do that, it's not a righteous deed. So the righteous deed is the inner interaction. So therefore, fasting, It's supposed to be the interaction with the fast, the purification of the soul, cleansing it from the bodily and ego, dictated to ego, giving charity. The outer action is not the righteous deed, the inner interaction. Now, if a Christian who is misinformed about Islam and the Prophet Muhammad and denies the Prophet Muhammad, but is committing righteous deeds, he is getting refined and he is eligible for paradise. However, if a Christian knows the truth of Prophet Muhammad and then denies him, then he is no different to Iblis. Iblis acknowledges the Tawheed of Allah. He acknowledges Qiyamah by saying, "Oh Allah, give me respite till the day of Qiyamah." He acknowledges the prophets and says, "Oh Allah, I will misguide all of them apart from your chosen ones." So he believes in the three tenets of Islam. Yet Allah calls him min al kafirin, denies, because he adamantly opposes the truth and prevails, and his ego prevails. So for me, it's not a problem if a Christian or a Jew or anybody else denies the blessed Prophet Muhammad. They can still be doing righteous deeds. And if you read the Quran, there is no centricity to Prophet Muhammad or any other prophet. Centricity is only to God and human endeavors. Everywhere in the Quran, there is no centricity to the Prophet. In the story of salvation.
I think, Habib Hussain Saab, please go ahead with your question.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh Saab. It was such a delight to listen to you. You clearly have the courage. You clearly have the courage of your convictions, and you state it so eloquently. What we've had in our, quite a few of my friends and I have had in our minds, you had the courage to state it openly and clearly. But we struggle in our day-to-day lives. We have positions of some responsibility in the community, and how do you get around orthodox leadership, which is today dominant, and a lot of what you have said today, which you clearly explained, is something that it resonates with one, and because it's your conscience and principles, and the Quran guides you on those, gives you revelations on that for your conscience and your principles. How do we handle? Because one is scholarship. I am no scholar. I'm a businessman, and one is scholarship, and the other is how do we get that to the common man? Because the common man believes clearly in the book as it is written and spoke and taught word to word, and that is 99% of the population. So that is how are you coping with that? Because you must be facing orthodoxy regularly in debates and things like that. And my second question, Sheikh Saab, is between the law of the land, constitution of any country, you touched upon that, and if at all there is a conflict with Sharia, how do we handle that? Thank you.
Thank you so much for those lovely questions and remarks. I'll go with the second one first. The Quran says, you who believe, be truthful to your commitment acts. As we stated, the Quranic societal law is not sacred or eternal. The law of the country will prevail so long as it is not unjust. So long as it is not unjust, it will prevail. And the Quran allows for that. Now, I think if we look closely into the history of the Blessed Prophet and the companions and the Imams, we will also see this level of tolerance, leverage towards pluralistic expression in terms of the societal conventions. I mean, the Khulafa Rashida, they adopted many of the ways of the Persians and the Romans administrative way, and they institutionalized them. They did not say this is Islam and this is not. They did not shy away from saying, okay, we can learn from you guys, we can institutionalize this. And on many occasions, the Khulafa did ijtihad, and in some instances, they did modify the law of the Quran as well. And we know this from history. So all of that is there. So that's as far as the second is concerned. As far as the first is concerned, I realize that there is a huge problem. But the Meccans accused the Prophet of corrupting the youth. That is quite insightful because it means that the youth are not as conditioned as the others are, and therefore, in light of their learning, in light of their human spirit, the media that they encounter, they are far more egalitarian. They are far more, if not pluralistic, then at least inclusivists, not exclusivists and restrictive like the older generation. So maybe one of the ways is to have gatherings with the youths, like this wonderful gathering that we have, to increase participation, to also have discussions, and slowly, gradually to let these ideas spread. One of the things we did was we established the Al-Mahdi Institute. Here we have intra-faith interactions, which are very enlightening in the sense that we learn about other faiths, the various different sects of Muslims come together and they critique openly their own history, theology, and each other's history and theology in a very scholarly fashion. And we are seeing that the scholars are changing, and as the scholars are changing, they are changing their congregations. But not only that, the millennials, when they attend, it resonates with them, this message, and they take it forward to their own groups. It's not a question, it won't be more than 50 years that all of us are gone and they will replace us. So I think that is something from our experiences in Birmingham and UK we have seen. Of course, there is always a huge challenge from the orthodoxy, uh, but that's always been the case. So, when you poke the eye of a lion, it's going to roar, right? And you're going to get injured. So that is something we know. But obviously, it's not nice to poke the eye all the time, and we can do things subtly as well. But this gathering in itself is a phenomenal forum for discussing ideas openly and letting them spread. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So Reverend, I have a quick follow-up, short, quick follow-up question, please.
Yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Just one question.
Yeah, please.
To help us answer, a question that sometimes help me answer a question that comes up. What is the significant difference between the two books before us and the Holy Quran?
Yeah, sure. Please take time. Please take time and study the Old Testament and the New Testament. Please. The Quran is extremely ambiguous. The Old Testament will supply a lot of the detail that is missing in the Quran because the Quran says, we believe in what is revealed upon us and revealed upon you, which actually imposed upon the Muslims a duty to go and read the previous scriptures. As far as the new scripture is concerned and the Psalms is concerned, you will see the strength of the spirituality no different from Islam. And it is so enriching. When we read the old scriptures, you will find, okay, there are depictions here of God that, are a little bit alien, but then you will find actually parallels within the Quran. Then you will see a God, a beautifully majestic and unknowable God as well in the Torah. You will come to Injil and you will see the subtlety with which Isa conducts himself and the message of love. You will see the prayers that are there. And then you will end up with one understanding that actually one books can never be enough. All of them have to come together for me to have that religious experience that is desired from being a religious person. But in addition to that, you will see the Mosaic law and you will see the Islamic law and you will stand back and you will say, What's the difference? There is no difference. You will come out with only one difference. You will say that the Quranic law is an upgraded version of the Mosaic law. It is as if in the time of Musa, the human community were still very young. In the time of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the community has grown. So Allah has removed all the majority of those harsh punishments. It's just like you don't tell off a young man, you tell off a child for misbehaving. For a young man, you just reason. You say, if you don't study, you can't shout. You owe yourself more dignity than that. That is the only difference you will find. Please read those scriptures.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, that was absolutely wonderful. You answer, Arif Saab. Because you may recall, Arif Saab, if I can briefly intervene before I bring on Irfan Shaikh, who has been waiting to ask this question. The Quran it talks about Ahlul Injil in Surah Maida, and ask the people of Injil, the Christians, to judge in accordance with what has been revealed. So which means if, as we Muslims argue today, most of us, that the book is corrupted, or in fact the book was also corrupted during the Prophet's time, why was the Quran telling the Ahlul Injil, or the people of Injil, to judge themselves in accordance with their own book?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure. This question, you might have reflected on this question, which, in my opinion, I feel that there was nothing wrong in people. In fact, the Quran also tells the Prophet, right, to judge in accordance with what has been revealed, and that includes other books also. It doesn't exclude the other books.
No, that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the essence
Yes.
is that we be one and the same.
Yes.
And by and large, the law system is also attested to be one. And I mean, if you look at the kosher method of the Vita, it's far better than the halal method.
Yes.
Far more precise than we are. We are a bit loose in our halal practices. They are so particular and meticulous. It's amazing.
Absolutely. I think Irfan Saab, and after that, Afsar Ali Saab.
Yes, welcome, Shaykh Arif. Alhamdulillah, very wonderful lecture. I'm really thrilled. And Alhamdulillah, like I read your book, God Centricity, given to me by Hanif Bhai, and it's absolutely gem. I'm really thrilled. Sheikh, I just wanted to make a small comment or just ask a question. Like we Muslims are being programmed that whatever we do as a good deed or charity, we are programmed to expect something in return. And that is the focus. Let's say Quran, Allah says, I am Ghani. He favors, but he does not expect. The same is replicated through his prophet, that you pass on and you do good, but do not expect in return. Everything is from Allah. Now, if you see, even a small charity, if a Muslim goes and helps somebody in hospital, he will say, this is my zakat, my sadaqah. Oh Allah, take something away from me. This is I am doing, and help me out of it. Hindus, Christians, all the godly people, they expect something in return. But when you see an atheist who does not believe in God, he sees as a human suffering, he goes and helps. Now I wonder what God will favor, Hindu, Muslim, Christian who believe in God, or an atheist who does his job believing that this is what God quality is, not believing in God. Yeah. Thank you.
No, what a wonderful observation. Alhamdulillah. Just to clarify that, God interacts with human beings at the level of human beings. Then he interacts with human beings at the level of humanity. So one is the limited state of humanness, and the other one is the aspiration of humanity. Humanity is the godliness within us. The Prophet taught, he stated, when you give charity, you are giving the wealth of God to the family of God. And therefore, thank Allah for giving you the opportunity to discharge your duty. Irfan Bhai, this is what you're talking about. That give in the way of Allah, not only through care of fellow human beings, but as a duty incumbent, and do not expect anything in return. Rather, thank Allah for relieving you of a burden. That's how the Prophet taught us. However, undeniably, the Quran also says, who will give me a loan so that I may multiply it many folds over? Now, if you look at the human psychology, we are not all spirited people, refined. We are mere mortals, growing into bodies that are material, filled with greed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses us as a parent, addresses the child, and cajoles the child, and somehow gives them incentives and bribery. We say to the child, look, if you do this for me, I will do this for you. The teacher says to the student, if you study well, you will get first prize. But when that young man grows up and doing a doctorate, he will say, my prize is the very graduation itself. I don't need any prize more than that. Graduation is the prize itself. And when the child grows up, he says to the parent, oh, mother, your pleasure is my reward. I don't want anything else. But at the outset of journey, we need to be incentivized by rewards. And that is unfortunately where the Muslims and the people of faith of Christians and Hindus have gotten stuck. We have gotten stuck at the level of wanting return. We are still in a childlike state. We need to arrive in the human state. So inshallah, hopefully we'll get there. But Irfan Bhai, thank you so much for that wonderful comment.
In fact, Arif Saab, I think if I'm not wrong, it's chapter 76 where the Quran says that don't even expect a thank you for what you have done.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that it wants us to reach that stage where we are not. Otherwise, we all become selfish, right? If you're doing it for the sake of Jannah or any other benefit on this planet, it becomes an act of selfishness.
You see, Ibn Sina had said the Muslims have turned means into ends and ends into means. Allah was the objective. Jannat and Jahannam were the means to get to Allah. Jannat is a little sweet and Jahannam is a whip. What happened instead was, instead of looking at Jannah to get to Allah, we started worshipping Allah to get to Jannah. So Allah became the means for us to get into paradise. So we've turned it around.
In fact, we started using Allah.
Allah has become the middleman whenever we
need. Amazing. That's an amazing insight. Absolutely. I think Afsar Ali Saab has been waiting for some time. Afsar Ali Saab, please go ahead.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh Arif Saab. Jazakallah khair for your wonderful presentation. I had not had the pleasure of or benefit of having read your book nor heard about you until yesterday. And yesterday, Faisal forwarded one of your khutbahs. It was amazing, especially considering, how myself and a few others here are very actively involved in the Chicago area. In intra-faith dialogue, particularly between amongst the Shia and Sunni brothers. I myself, having been raised in the Sunni environment, I myself do not call myself Sunni or Shia, but just a Muslim, plain and simple. But anyway, and I fully subscribe to your interpretation of, say, Surah Baqarah 62 or Maida 69, much more egalitarian approach of interpreting, mashallah. A couple of questions that I have. By the way, yesterday's khutbah, the khutbah that was forwarded, it was a lot more palatable than some of the statements you made today. And I would love to hear from you maybe some clarifications. One particularly about how do you interpret heaven and hell in the Quran, how it is described. I know you did mention within the last few minutes about means to an end versus end by itself. Yes, definitely. Muslims tend to turn the means into an end by themselves. You know, the five pillars, which were a means for towards a greater end, we've turned them into end by themselves, to the point where we are just pillars, but just ruins of pillars, not holding what they're supposed to hold up. So how do you interpret that? And the second real quick question would be, you did mention about the earlier scriptures. How can I rely on them? Because the very litmus test that I use for dismissing many of our extra Quranic sources that Muslims rely on, the very litmus test, when I apply it to some of the other scriptures, I find issues with it. How do I reconcile that and say, you know what, okay, I'm going to details that are not mentioned in the Quran. Now I'm going to go and rely on earlier revelations. How do I accept those sources, but yet still reject other extra Quranic sources that Muslims blindly seem to accept?
Sure. Wonderful. Thank you. The first thing is the Quran came in a context. So I always say Quran is an ordained word of God. However, it is delivered within a human context. In terms of it being the word of God, it's salient and eternal. In terms of the context, it's temporal. And the context is a limiting factor for the communication of God. Think about it. The Quran does not talk about giraffe. Why? Because the context doesn't understand giraffe. The Quran has camel inside it. I often ask my Muslim audience, you read the verse of the Quran, وَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. Oh, لا ما من رطب ولا يابس إلا في كتاب مبين. There is nothing wet or dry, but it is inside the book. They said, yes. I said, does that mean everything is in the Quran? They say, yes. I said, well, where is the giraffe? Where is the kangaroo? And then they are stuck. There is a huge misunderstanding. Kitabul Mubin is not the Quran. The Quran had to come within a human fashion. Abu Lahab, Zayd, the adopted son of the Blessed Prophet, the companions of the Prophet, the Battle of Uhud, the Battle of Badr, these are temporal events. Now the Quran has to supply its message molded in these temporal events. Similarly, if you describe Jannah to a person who is within a desert atmosphere, Jannah means garden with rivers, with trees, with honey, with milk, with pure wine, all those things that they desire, with laham, meat, and fruit, so on and so forth. So the description of paradise is given in a very temporal sense. Today, we will say, but what will I do with an infinite life in paradise, just eating, drinking, having lots of women? I mean, it's not very paradise. A paradise should be a place where there is exploration, there is growth, there is imagination. You can be sure that if God were to speak to us today, the language will be modified. The examples will be changed. Not to say that that is not Jannah. Yes, the Quranic Jannah is Jannah, but a very watered down version of the real thing. So Jannah, actually, when we look at the hadith of the Prophet, seems to be a place where the human being exercises his godliness, the ability to create infinitely. Now, the wonderful thing is that if you put a human being to sleep and give them control over their dream, they are stuck in a small space and that's infinite and they can create infinitely. The only thing that restricts them is lack of imagination. That is why when they asked the first Imam Ali, what would be the last thing you would advise me to do before my death? He said, learn something before you die. Because the more you learn, the more you are accomplished within your own self. So Jannah is all those things that are there, but it is far more than that. The Quran says it's nothing like any mind can imagine. It's a very different state of existence. The
But
Quran
as far
says,
as who gets it or who doesn't get it, that's what my question was. Yeah, I agree with you with the description. Those are more allegorical. The details, Jannatun tajri min tahtiha al-anhar, those are more allegories. Yes.
so are you saying who goes to Jannah?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, who goes or who doesn't? That's what I was hoping for.
Majority of humanity is going to go to paradise. Majority. The Quran does not call Christians mushrik. It says this Trinitarian view is a form of denial of God, but he still calls them Ahlul Kitab. On the other hand, Quran calls the Muslims Aktharuhum mushrikun, that they are mushrik. He calls Muslims kafir. He calls Muslims munafiq. Yes? Majority of humanity is going to paradise. How? Let's just give the rationale for this. Sabiqun al-awwalun. Yes? فَالسَّابِقُونَ السَّابِقُونَ. The Surah Waqiyah. ثُلَّةٌ مِّنَ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَثُلَّةٌ مِّنَ الْآخِرِينَ. Now, وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنَ الْآخِرِينَ. There'll be a great many from the first ones in a party, and somewhat little numbers from the latter ones. Ashabul Yameen ma Ashabul Yameen. It's a Thullatun min al-awwalin wa Thullatun min al-akhirin. A great many from the first and great many from the last generations. Now, if we are molded on the nature of God, if He has breathed into us of His Spirit, yes, Sibghatullah, and if we are colored in the color of God, then we will act out His nature on earth, and we do that. We are creators, we remove sickness, we remove poverty, we are the hands of God, humanity, yes? Now, if you look at a huge town, like say Birmingham, with 3 million population, we only have one prison. Out of 3 million people, you will find at the most 5,000 inside the prison. This is the analogy between paradise and hell. Hell always has to be smaller than heaven. And the hell of God is empty. That's what it says. وَهَلْ مِن مَزِيدٍ. Is there more? Because it's empty. Even the small hell of God is empty. Can you see that? And if God were not to put majority of humanity into paradise, we will say, God, there's something wrong with you. I, as a human being with all my flaws and weaknesses and angers and jealousy, I am ready to allow everybody into my Jannah. You being God are so miserly. What sort of a God are you? Putting everybody in hell? That's not God. In fact, about hell, Allah says they will do their time, لَابِثِينَ فِيهَا أَحْقَابًا. They will live there for a long period of time and then they will go back to heaven. Their time is finished. The sentence is done. Go to heaven now. Paradise. This is our nature. It's the nature of God.
In fact, Arif Saab, the Quran does not talk about heaven as a concrete concept. It talks about, Masal al-Jannah.
Yes.
It's a misal. It's just a similitude of Jannah. In terms of what you said, for people who are starved of all these things in a desert, starved of water, starved of any means to a nice place, you show them these kind of things, as a misal.
But
Something
again,
beyond our comprehension. That's what he says.
Yes.
I think.
but something more than that. The Quran says about Jahannam, La yaslaha illa al-ashqa, that nobody will go to hell except the most wretched. Now, when I look, I don't find the most wretched soul anywhere, apart from maybe you can say one or two. But who is most wretched? You look at the Christians, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Muslims, the Shia, the Sunni, nobody is wretched. Everybody
Yes.
has the light of God inside them.
But here we are busy giving certificates of hell and also heaven. So this is where we need to move away from the kinds of concepts that we have made ourselves hostage to.
Jhat takfir jo bolte na.
Yes. So anybody else would like to ask Arif Saab any question? I don't see any raised hands, but they can unmute and ask. Don't hesitate. You won't get this opportunity because very often, of course, we plan to bring in our Shaykh Arif very often, no doubt about that. But then he's a very busy man. This is an opportunity. I don't want people to lose this opportunity. I would like so somebody who has not asked any question before. I mean, that'd be a better thing, right? I can see Shakil's hands raised. Shakil, can you just hold on a minute? Let's give a chance to someone who has not asked any question.
Assalamu alaikum, Faiz Sahab. This is Majid Parekh.
Majid Sahab, please go ahead. Yes.
Thank you very much, Shaykh Arif Sahab. I'm very much impressed with your intellectual and honesty. You have delivered a wonderful lecture. I have a question on two verses. One is fifth verse of chapter 5. اليوم أحل لكم الطيبات وطعام الذين أوتوا الكتاب حل لكم وطعامكم حل لهم والمحسنات من المؤمنات والمحسنات من الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم إذا آتيتموهن أجورهن محسنين غير مسافحين ولا متخذي أخدان. Asad Sahab has translated it as like this: lawful to you are in wedlock women from among those who believe, and in wedlock women from among those who have been vouchsafed revelation before your time, provided that you give them your dowers, taking them in honest wedlock. This is one verse, and the other verse is in the same chapter, the 51st verse. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tattakhizul yahuda wan nasara awliya ba'dhum awliya'u ba'd wa man yatawallahum minkum fa innahu minhum innallaha la yahdil qawmaz zalimin. O you have attained to faith, do not take the Jews and the Christians for your allies. They are but allies of one another, and whoever of you allies himself with them becomes verily one of them. Behold, God does not guide such evildoers. My question is, in one verse, Allah is permitting to make family ties and family allies with the earlier people of book. And in this ayat, Allah says, do not take Jews and the Christians as your allies.
Yes.
Is it not a contradiction?
Yes, of course. Shall I go through this?
Yeah, please.
Okay, in 2 years' time, inshallah, if Allah gives life, we want to discuss the methodology of interpretation of the Quran. One of the failures of the Muslims has been that we think every verse is equal to every other verse, and we think every verse is equal. The Quran was a document that directed the Prophet through challenges of life. And therefore, the Quran has to be read in its chronological order of revelation. And we have to understand the instances in which the Quran was revealed. So it's like nation states. Today, Europe says and India says, no flights from Britain allowed in India at all. Don't allow any flights from Britain. In 1 week's time, India and Britain will have trade links and resumption of flights. Now somebody, after 1,000 years, looking at these two incidences, not explained in logical order, and in the background will say, oh, this is totally inconsistent. But if they understood that the first rule was made because of the pandemic and the new strain of coronavirus, and subsequently the new rule was made due to the vaccination, it makes sense that there was no contradiction. Can you see that? This is the way the Quran needs to be recited, in the chronological order. At one point, the Jews and the Christians were conspiring against Islam, and the Prophet Muhammad was told that do not take them as allies, because that was not about all the Jews and the Christians. It was about a particular group. If you look at the Sha'nun Nuzul, or the instance of revelation. So this verse is not universally applicable, and neither is it eternal. Then, at the time of the completion of the message of God, Allah lifts all the previous bars and says, no, you can interact with them, you can eat their zabiha as well, and you can marry their women properly. So the Quran has to be read in two ways: chronological order, and two, contextually, and then you will find no contradiction.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
No, I think even otherwise, even without the Shanan Nuzul, Arif Sahib, the verse is quite clear. Obviously, the Quran cannot contradict itself in such a glaring way. So the fact is, that that the context had to be different. At a time when those people were conspiring against the Prophet and his movement, Muslims were asked to be wary of them. So once that fear was gone, things changed. So I don't you think we don't even need any Shana Nuzul for that? Even without it, it's quite obvious, isn't it?
No, it is. It is. But what I'm saying is, it is also always good to have the benefit of the background. It just gives us a lot of,
Yeah.
for example, that verse that kill the enemy of God. What is the punishment of enemy of God? Save that they be killed in reverse direction or banished. Now, if you look at that, the Sha'nu Nuzul of that particular verse, it was Muslim bandits who had
Yes.
attacked. So God is calling Muslim bandits the enemies of God. So otherwise, the Muslims will say the non-Muslims are enemies of God and we need to kill them and burn them and whatever.
No.
But if you look at the Sha'nu Nuzul, you will say, wait a minute, these are Muslims. And it's nothing to do with non-Muslims. So
Yes.
it's very good to have that benefit of the Sha'nu Nuzul in the context.
Yes. Yes. So, any other person would like to ask? Someone who has not asked, I think I can see Jasbi Khan. Please go ahead.
Sorry, Faisal, this is Dr. Kamran Khan. My phone was
Oh.
giving trouble, so I can ask the question later. If somebody else is there, please let
Yeah,
me know.
fine. That was very nice of you. Anybody else who has not asked the question? I mean, I would like some women to ask. There's a lot of women here. I think somebody must ask, right? I'm sure. There's a lot of noise somewhere. Who's it? Oh my God. Rajaullah Sahab, you want to ask? Qureshi Sahab? I think there are two mics on. You have to switch off
you're
one.
logged in from two different accounts.
Yes, you log out from one.
Unfortunately.
No.
Mute one of them. Mute at least one of them.
Oh God.
Okay. Can you?
I have muted one of your mics. Now you go ahead. Rajaullah Sahab.
Faiz bhai, I can't hear.
You can't. I can't hear. So maybe we'll give it to some other person. Maybe let him.
Yes, private Qureshi Sahab.
Hello.
Hello. Rajaullah Sahab, I think.
Let me turn off my computer.
You are logged in from two accounts. You have to switch off one at least.
Okay. How is it now?
Yeah.
Better.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I tried to put the other computer to sleep. There was a reason I had to turn on both of them.
Okay.
I don't want to waste time on that. But can you hear me now properly?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. I'm sorry for wasting your time.
No.
Very small question in continuation with what Sheikh just said recently, that Quran ought to be read in the way, in the sequence that it was revealed. And that's a very, very good point. The only question is how to find out when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to put it in this order. That's what we have been told by scholars, that the Quran was revealed obviously in a chronological order, but then when to put it into a form to be available to humanity for future, it was organized in a certain way. And so there must be wisdom behind it. But if you want to read it chronologically, and particularly to find out the context, one big question comes up, that how do you find the correct chronology? Scholars differ on those. And leaving that apart, even whatever the scholars would come up with, for a lay person, how can he get to that chronological Quran? Is there a source where you can get chronological Quran in the context?
So, yeah, thank you for that wonderful question. There are two chronologies. One that the Muslim historians have suggested, and by and large, the Muslims accept that one. And the other one is the one that's suggested by the Orientalist, and I feel that the Muslim one seems to be far more accurate. And the other thing that's a giveaway in chronology is that when you look at the themes of the surahs, you will say definitely this is Meccan, these are Madinans. As the history unfolds, we can see that the revelation addresses those issues and gives more and more identity to Muslims. If you go to Google, otherwise I can just pass on the details to Faizbhai as to which chronology we are more than most of us, which chronology we accept according to Muslim historians and the Ruwat. Now, the Blessed Prophet, he did not suggest the chronology, he suggested where certain verse should be placed afterwards. Yes. So, and the Mufassirin have already done detailed work that when you see in Surah Mudassir or Muzammil, you see verses, you can clearly see that the surah is Makki, but these verses at the end are Madani. So they will tell you that the Prophet, through Prophet's instructions, we have put them there. So by and large, we have got that. The only thing the Prophet said was put Fatiha, Sab'a Mathani into the beginning, which is Fatiha. However, the compilation of the Quran was done by the Sahaba, Abdullah bin Mas'ud and Zayd bin Arqam and others, who suggested that we put the bigger surahs first, then the Mi'at, the 100 verses surahs, then the smaller ones. So that was the wisdom in the collection of the Quran by the noble Sahaba. That does not mean that the Prophet instructed that. Of course, a lot of the Shias are saying that the Prophet instructed this particular, what you call it, structure of the Quran together with a lot of the Sunni scholars. I personally do not feel that the Prophet gave the structure of the arrangement of the surahs. The Prophet did give certain verses to be placed into certain surahs. But as far as the order is concerned, I do not feel that the Prophet was particular about that. I don't think it even mattered that much to him. The Quran used to be in a written form between his mimbar and his house in scrolls. And that's all we know. Apart from that, to say that the order of the Quran was suggested by the Prophet, that would be pushing it quite a bit. But yes, he has said, put certain verses in certain places. Mufassirin have got that. The Quran that has come out lately that is very, very good for the English world is the study Quran under the auspices of Sayyid Hussain Nasr. It's very, very good. A team of academicians have put it together. It's available on Amazon.
In fact, there's also a
so
Birmingham
do I-
manuscript, right?
Yeah.
Now,
So do I understand correctly that what you are saying is that the verses in each surah were organized as the Prophet was directed by Jibreel alayhi salam,
Yes,
exactly like that, but the order of the surahs in the Quran are not necessarily directed.
that's
Is
right.
that correct?
That's right. Yes,
But that's
right.
not what I mean. We as laypersons have found out reading different sources. So what you're saying is there's more than one interpretation of that.
Yes, you know the chronology that you want of the Quran. I can pass it on to Faizbhai afterwards, and he can share with you. And this is in accordance with the majority of the Muslim consensus that the early Muslim that this was the chronology of the revelation of the Quran prior to the compilation.
yeah, in fact, I mean, Arif Sahab, how would you translate this verse? I think if I'm not wrong, is Muddassir or Muzammil, I do not know. Inna jamahu alayhi wa Qur'ana. Allah,
this is Surah Qiyamah.
Qiyamah, yeah.
Now
Allah talks about doing it himself.
Yeah. So this is the interesting thing. You say Surah Qiyamah was a Makki surah.
Yeah.
According to Allama Maududi. Now, if you look at the theme of Surah Qiyamah, before these verses that you've mentioned, it's talking about eschatology at the end of humanity. لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بنفس اللوامة أيحسب الإنسان أن لن نجمع عظامه, and it goes on. At a certain point, the revelation shifts to the Prophet. It's expressing the day of Qiyamah, but suddenly it talks about the Prophet. لا تحرك به لسانك لتعجل به. Oh Muhammad, do
Don't
not
be in a hurry.
hasten it. علينا جمعه وقرآنه, so on and so forth. We will gather it, we will write it and differentiate it. What was happening, according to Allama Maududi, was that the Prophet was struggling to retain it all, and that's why he wanted to give it away quickly. And the revelation just made a particular pause and said to the Prophet, do not make haste, don't worry. We will perform its recital, we will gather it, and we will compile it. So that was directly referring to the prophetic state of panic. But don't panic, we will do it ourselves. That can be true in terms of the surah in the whole Quran without the compilation in which surah goes first and which surah goes second, right?
Okay.
Because the Sahaba in the Nurul Khilafa used to have differences of opinion as to which surah should go where. For example, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud had his own view of which surah should go where, right? He agreed to most parts, disagreed to other parts, and other great noble Sahaba who had rendered the Quran to heart and were with the Prophet had a difference of opinion of which surah should go where. So that just says that might show that the Prophet had suggested which surah goes where, but the fact that the Sahaba had a difference of opinion as to which surah should go where also shows that there was no consensus there as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
True. Any other question from someone who
more?
was not asked?
Can I ask one more?
No, you just Qureshi Sahab, let us give a chance to some other person. If there are no more, then because there is
if
another.
Nobody else, yes.
Yes. So we would prefer someone who was not asked. Okay, since nobody is raising their hands, probably we should give a chance to Mr. Shakeel first, who asked, and after that, Dr. Kamran, and then Qureshi Sahab once again. Mr. Shakeel, you can unmute and ask if you're there. If you're not there, then perhaps we will give it a chance to, we'll give it to Dr. Kamran. I think Mr. Shakeel, I don't see him. Okay, Dr. Kamran, can you go ahead, please?
Yeah, thank you, Faizul Bhai.
Yeah,
Arif Bhai, one of the things we notice is that Quran celebrates human plurality and it gives sanctity to all other scriptures. And it says that I have sent prophets and scriptures to all civilization. And then in Surah Nahl 43 and Surah Anbiya 7, the prophet is told, Fas'al ahlal zikr. You go and ask the people of previous revelations who are loyal to previous revelations in kuntum la ta'lamun, if you don't know. So should we be looking at communicating more with people from other religions who are exploring and who are loyal to their scriptures? Because here even prophet is being told, Fas'al ahlal zikr. That's my question.
What a wonderful observation. What a phenomenal observation. Thank you. So thank you so much. And in fact, if with your permission, I'm going to use that line of reasoning. It's a phenomenal observation that we need to ask
Please do.
in
Please
order
do.
to
Please do.
clarity and reconcile. Yeah. And resolve the ambiguities. No, what a wonderful point. Thank you so
Should
much.
we all be exploring whether Ahlul Zikr exists in the world today and communicating with them? That's my question. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, the way you have placed the question in itself is a very convincing argument, isn't it? That we should be doing it. It's a compelling argument that we have to find Ahlul Dhikr and get confirmation from them and resolution of ambiguity that we find in our own scriptures. Yes, absolutely.
In fact, Arif Saab, in Maida itself, when the Jews and Christians used to come to the Prophet for decision, the Quran asks a rhetorical question in Maida. Why do they want to come to you for the decisions when they have their own scriptures with them?
Yeah, yeah.
So that also is something interesting, right? From a Quranic point of view. Quran is asking the Jews and Christians, even after the revelation of the Quran, or even while the Prophet is there as the last prophet of God, and yet the Quran is telling the Jews and Christians, so you don't have to come and seek the opinion of the Prophet or his judgment. You have your own scriptures.
No, absolutely. But I think more than that,
Yeah.
that's just to do with the law. But more than that, I think it's to do with the revelation being one story,
Yes.
separated over thousands of years. So I found something very interesting that Nabi Nuh mentioned within the Quran, Salamullah alayhi, but the detail is missing. If we look at the Old Testament, there is phenomenal amount of detail of the communication of God with Nabi Nuh, the structure of the ark. And when you read that, you say, Subhanallah, now the Quran makes sense, because there are many unanswered questions from the verses of the Quran. And our tafsir literature sometimes leaves us even more thirsty to understand what went on. But when you read the scriptures and their accompanying sort of literature, you think, wow, here is the full story. And it blends in beautifully.
In fact, you will be pleased to know, Arif Saab, that our next talk is by a famous scholar of the Quran and the Bible from the University of Notre Dame in the USA, on the topic of the Quran and its biblical context.
Ah, wonderful. Wonderful. So there you go. I think that's a better way to say it. The context of the Quran is found in previous scriptures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know him, is Reynolds, Gabriel Syed Reynolds, a Lebanese Christian, in fact.
No, but I would be delighted to join in on that day.
Yeah, I'll be informing you certainly. The date I have, because I had to cancel his lecture last week because of my examinations, which I had, like yours, I postponed it. So probably next week or the week after that, we may be organizing it, inshallah.
Please, bhai, I'm going to have to apologize because I haven't
Yes.
prayed my Asr namaz, so I have
Yeah,
to.
okay. I think we have already reached 9 p.m. now here. And since there were no more questions from anybody else, but I do see two raised hands, Arif Saab. Can
Very
you
quick.
just take one last question?
Sure.
Yeah, it's from Mr. Ashfaq, who were not asked before. Majid bhai, I'll have to excuse you. You have to excuse me because
Yes,
Ashfaq has not asked.
I understand, sir.
Ashfaq Sahab can go ahead, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Arif Sahab, you mentioned that the context of the Quran is temporal.
Yes.
Right? So when there are certain verses in the Quran, for example, the inheritance laws where the woman gets half, or regarding the witness where there's been mention of either two men or one man and two women. So when I study the Quran today, what is the relevance of those verses?
So if you look at those verses, you will see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pragmatically molding the precepts of justice and ihsan in accordance with the strengths and the weaknesses of the immediate context. So that's the first thing we will see. It shows us how to mold the essence within forms in our own societal context. So that is one thing it teaches us. The other amazing thing about the Quran is that the Quran does not only need to be recited atomistically, word to word, verse by verse. It has relevance everywhere else. It's a very ambiguous book. So, for example, when the Quran talks about a female in a verse, you will say, well, that's a temporal verse. However, if you look at the number of male and female mentioned within the Quran, they will be equal as well. وَوَزَّعَ الْمِيزَانِ وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ. He has placed the scales. Do not transgress the scales. Now, the word female was necessarily put there in order for the whole of the Quran to give a greater sense of meaning. So the Quran is like phenomenal. It is a miracle. It doesn't need anybody to tell us. When we read the beautiful consistency of the terms in the Quran, the ending of the Quran, the prose of the Quran, and the way its numerical values and the way things are mentioned, you will say it doesn't have to make sense in that verse, But that very word of inheritance, if taken out of that verse and compared elsewhere with the words of the Quran and contrasted, it forms a beautiful numerical pattern. And that's mind-boggling as to how did that happen. So in 2 years' time, if Allah gives life, I want to discuss this particular theme over a set of 10 lectures as to why certain things you will say it's in a temporal context, so it doesn't make any sense now. But why does it make sense in a greater, more comprehensive reading of the Quran? Not only the esoteric, spiritual meanings, but even the apparent meanings. It has a phenomenal meaning, but not in the atomistic sense that we are reading, in the holistic sense. But inshallah, if Allah gives life, we will want to discuss that.
Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shaykh Arif Sahab. That was a fascinating time that we spent 2 full hours from 7 to 9 p.m. India time. I mean, we have not had enough of you. So I think you will have to promise us to come back again because it's not my wish. It's so many people have been messaging me that we'll have to invite you again.
I'll be honored, truly honored,
yes,
if you invite me again. Thank
definitely.
you.
And this is just the beginning of a series of talks of yours on our forum, inshallah. And of course, this talk has been recorded, and I'll be sending you the recordings, and also we'll also be posting it on our YouTube channel soon, inshallah. So this has been a wonderful session, Arif Sahib, and I have no words to thank you. You spent 2 full hours despite your busy schedule, and you gave us fascinating insights into the very meaning of the word Allah itself. I mean, the talk was superb. In fact, from God we slowly graduated to the Quran. We started with God, ended with the Quran. So and if you know, it also today also happens to be the birthday of Ghalib, the great poet.
Yes.
Ghalib. So I would like to end this talk, and after thanking you, with a couplet from Ghalib on God itself. Where he said that उसे कौन देख सकता वो यगाना है वो एकता जो दुई की वो भी होती तो कहीं दो चारों होता. So who can see him? Nobody has seen him. If there was even an element or a small element of duality in him, then he would have been visible.
Yeah.
So the God is unique, God is monotheistic, God is one. So therefore, that is why he's not visible to us. We'll have to imagine him in the abstract. So that was that was a profound couplet from a poet whose today happens to be his 223rd birth anniversary, if I'm not wrong. So therefore, on that note, I'd like to not just thank you for your time, but also all the participants who stayed on right till the end and who have been sending me messages to request you to come back again for another lecture. Thank you so much, friends, and you made the day, you made the evening.
And thank you so much.
Khuda Hafiz to everybody.
Jazakumullah.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.